Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious today. Where am I? What's on our green screen here that Marty Winkle, my co producer, has chosen on what today's about our 1075th episode of Stay Curious. Glad that you're on board, born out of the pandemic in March 2020. So our nonprofit museum could tell our supporters that we weren't going to lay down, and we appreciate everybody finding us during then. 4 years later, we're on YouTube, where we got 3,000 subscribers on YouTube and at least 100 followers every day of our humble little podcast. We know Dave Stangy's probably watching out there in Michigan. Thank you, Dave. Steve Jokums up in the Lake County Spaceport of uh, Illinois on the shores of Michigan up there. Steve's got a business called Lake County Spaceport where you can buy decals for your models of spacecraft. So, promoting that for our friend Steve up there, and also promoting our museum that we're a nonprofit and do need money for operating expenses, including keeping this show alive. There are where we, like so many other nonprofits, are in some difficult financial times right now. And if you know a corporation that would like a big tax deduction discount for giving us uh, some serious money, $50 to $100,000, we would love to talk to you. So, that aside, today's program, we've got an interesting space history of the superpowers, which I don't like saying that very much because in the 21st century, all countries should be equal, but definitely Russia, US, America, and China, the three superpowers that have explored space the most heavily in the last 60 years. And that includes the first women in space, forever the first women in space, Valentina Tereshkova of the USSR, now Russia, on June 16th, 1963. All right. Then in 2012, on June 16th, the first Chinese woman went to space. All right. Louis Yang there. And we're going and then, of course, Sally Ride, America's first woman to go to space, June 18th, 1983. So all of them were in the month of June, a day apart. And we're going to feature a little bit about every lady. This is June 14th, 2024. So tomorrow we'll be celebrating the 61st anniversary of Valentina Tereshkova. She's still very much alive in her 80s in Russia, and of course parlayed her only flight into a huge career of the Politburo of that communist country. And so that means that on Monday will be, no, Sunday is Sally Ride's, no, Monday would be Sally Ride's flight. And we've got a special guest, a 90-year-old Keith Taylor is going to be our guest on Monday. He was just in the museum a little bit ago, and we asked Keith to talk. He worked on the instrument unit of the Saturn V rocket, among other things. So another 90-year-old we'll interview Monday, Keith Taylor. But we're going to talk about each one of these women. It's an interesting juxtaposition that they were all in June, and that the first woman and the first Russian and then the first Chinese woman on the same date. So it ties it all together there that we can honor them all. Of course, Sally Ride died of cancer in I think it was 2012. Yep, at age 61. So we dearly miss her, gone way too soon. But what a phenomenal job that her Sally Ride Space Center in San Diego is doing. So let's talk a little bit about, yes, this is Valentina Tereshkova's spacecraft. This was all the control system that she looked at. When she was strapped into a chair, she apparently did her 3 day flight was more than all of the Mercury astronaut flights combined. Okay. Gordon Cooper had flown a 1 day mission, and then the rest of them added up to about less than a day, even. So, this was all she was looking at. And one of the most important things was over on the right hand side, the microphone where she could talk right there. I believe it came out of that cradle there, and she talked to every communist country that she flew over. other cosmonauts kind of ridiculed her a little bit, that all she did was just sit there and talk like a woman, and that's a horrible stereotype. But a few switches on the left-hand side there that she probably had to activate to open up the hatch door to let her out so she could parachute on her feet from her spacecraft. That's right. We'll talk about that here in as we look here at Valentina Tereshkova. 3 days in space. Okay, this was the sixth flight of a crewed spacecraft by Russia after Yuri Gagarin. There she's shown young when she flew with her spacecraft, and how she looks in the basically today. I was trying to see. She is coming up on. Wish it said how old she is there. I'm gonna have to do a little subtraction there. She is 87 years old, I believe. Yes, 87. Born in 37. So that'd make her 87 years old, born March 6th in the Soviet Union. She was a textile worker and an amateur skydiver, and that's an important part of her story. As part of the Soyuz spacecraft was jumping out of it before it landed, because it did not have retro rockets on to brace that fall. So Marty, we have a comment already?
Yeah, we have a comment from Robert Law. He says, first British astronaut was Helen Sharman, who flew to Mir in 1991.
The first what astronaut?
First British astronaut was Helen Sharman, Sharman.
Yes.
She flew to Mir in 1991.
1991. So Robert's saying I'm omitting Britain astronauts in this and neglecting to call them a superpower. Is that what you're aiming at, Robert? Have you had two cocktails already in your evening up there in the, he's in Robert Law is in Dundee, Scotland. Yes, just teasing you there, my friend. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. The first British lady. Of course, other women have followed from their countries, of course, in there. But that was in 1991. And yes, maybe should mention that the next time we do this show. Helen Sharman there. And she did go up to the Mir for a stay there. And Mark Thiel's watching. He's looking forward to a good show. Okay, we'll have Marty switch over here and go on camera here with me there. And Mark Usiak and Gary Gerald are all saying hi to us. And William Whiting sending love and prayers for Karan. And thank you for bringing up our executive director, who is undergoing treatment for cancer. And everybody's known that now that Karan does have a type of cancer that we hope is treatable. And so keep her in your prayers. And we won't elaborate any more than that until her family wants us to. But keep her in our prayers and thoughts. And we're looking at a long time, maybe without having Karan at the helm here. But so I will try to update everybody next week on a Facebook page as we see what's going on. And Steve Jokums also has Karen Conklin, our executive director, in his thoughts. She's been part of this museum for over 20 years. So let's look at the big three here. This is a Byaskov on the left, Byaski on the left, and Yuri Gagarin on the right with their female comrade there, who was chosen because she was a very good parachute jumper. Byovsky's there because he was launched today in 1963, orbiting the Earth. And then Valentina was launched the next day, and they got within no more than, how close did they get? Not more than 3 miles. They were within 3 miles of each other in different orbital planes, okay, but they did talk to each other. And Russia, the USSR, had two human beings orbiting in two different spacecraft, within itself creates a whole logistical problems that you have to solve with communications and tracking and so forth. Though launched a day apart, they landed on the same day, June 19th. She landed in Kazakhstan and he 3 hours later. And we'll show you how that landing looks here in a few minutes. On this single flight, like I said, she logged more flight time than all the American astronauts had flown at the time to date. And she did have comparatives, had some nausea, space sickness, and physical discomfort. They won't reveal how much of the flight, but she orbited the Earth 48 times, almost 3 days. Okay. And she maintained a flight log, took photographs of the horizon, which were later used to identify aerosols in the atmosphere, and constantly communicated. Cameras were inside and outside for live footage. That was a breakthrough back then, also. So when she talked to her Russian comrade, Bayovsky, in Vostok 5, she said, "It is I, Seagull. Everything is fine. I see the horizon. It's sky blue with a dark stripe. How beautiful the earth is. Everything's going well." So that was some of the chit chat that they mentioned. And her capsule has been in the London Science Museum as recently as 2016. Don't know if it's still there or not. Let's look at the kind of logistics of flying this. Yes, Mark Thiel, I'm going to be talking about that. She did eject from her spacecraft like all of the early cosmonauts did, without knowledge of Americans for almost a decade. Though it was written in books, those books weren't translated into English from Russian. So some obscure books did mention that Gagarin had ejected out and was met by a farmer that had a shotgun and thought that he was an alien, and so that's one reason why they put that CCCP on the helmet there, which stood for United Socialist Republic. But there she is getting suited up, kind of a high flight suit for aircraft. Had to undergo rigorous training. There you see the configuration of the cosmonaut in the orange suit. There's a beautiful display of this at the Cosmosphere. I've seen it with the ejection seat. At the top up there is where the hatch is blown out, and they shoot out of a MiG jet style ejection seat. All right. And so that would have made the interior of that quite nasty when it came back. The bottom section is the avionics, the thruster fuels, and so forth on there. And of course, at the top, you have the antennas. Here's the control panel inside that Voskhod spacecraft, which was probably not much different than the other Voskhod cosmonauts. The other 5, they also flew by wire and did not have complete control of their spacecraft like we did on our Mercury flights. We, from the start, from the second flight of Carpenter, mimicking Glenn, he certainly maneuvered around on there. So note the toggle switches on the left. I find that quite interesting. Those are kind of easy to bump into, it would look like, Marty. They don't have the traditional covers over them that I see in your lunar module that you helped build. So I would question whether that's an exact replica. And I see some little buttons on the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of thing. So you know what? We're going to have to get Gary Allgaier on here to explain what that's all about. And if you're watching Gary in Georgia, we will be trying to maybe Google Meets you up there in your vacation spot, the forests of Georgia. We had a great Google Meets with European Eurocom for the ESA. Alex Carl yesterday. So check that out. The Google Meets went pretty well, and we've got that figured out. We'll be bringing you more people from around the country and around the world on Stay Curious, I guarantee it. For those of you around looking for the Starlink launch, it's been moved to 5:07 now for T-0 for another group of Starlinks going up. So we'll be able to, it was about this time, so we'll be able to go out and see him. And Carlton's also sending hugs and prayers to our executive director, Karan. Here's an artist configuration of that ejection seat. Of course, it's got to move it away from the spacecraft, that its own parachute comes out, and then this seat falls away from you and your parachutes come out and you land on there. So this is quite harrowing. See if we had any specific notes about this that I wanted to make sure I told you. like all planned Vostok missions, Tereshkova ejected from the capsule at about 4 miles above the Earth and made a parachute landing in Kazakhstan, and Bykovsky landed 3 hours later after her. It was later disclosed that she encountered challenges in managing her parachute due to violent gusts of wind. However, she landed safely but bruised her nose, and until she was recovered by the cruise, she had dinner with some local villagers in the Altai Karai who helped her get out of her spacesuit. All right. So this was a huge propaganda event for the Russians, and specifically Premier Nikita Khrushchev. You'll see a picture of him, who used his cosmonauts like pawns. And after this flight, they put three cosmonauts without spacesuits in a adapted Vostok spacecraft, called it Voskhod, put some retro rockets on it because they all couldn't jump out with parachutes. And Khrushchev was overthrown in a coup by Brezhnev while that flight was going on. And we've talked about that over and over. Here's a clip from a movie film that was made of her eating in space. Of course, 3 days in space, she was going to get hungry. Not sure how they solved all the bathroom facility stuff, because she's just in that spacesuit. And we've never heard her talk about that or read that anywhere. This is what the Soyuz, it looks like a Soyuz. Yes, that's what the Vostok spacecraft looked like landing, with the charred re-entry surface on there. So quite interesting to see these pictures taken over 60 years ago. So Khrushchev, like I said, used them as a huge propaganda ploy. And here she is with another cosmonaut that I can't identify. That's not Bykovsky, but there's Yuri Gagarin on the left, and on the right, Nikita Khrushchev. 1 million flowers were brought in by children to celebrate the success of the dual flights and greet the cosmonauts in Moscow. That could be Bykovsky, but it doesn't really look like him. They saluted Khrushchev, and she was dressed in civilian attire. Thousands of people in Red Square and made speeches atop Lenin's tomb. So you get the picture that it was pure propaganda, that women were now superior in Russia to any other women on the face of the earth. That was what they boldly said to everybody. Our women, our men are braver, stronger, and the communist way of life is the way to live, all right? And of course, we know that was wrong. And for even more propaganda, following her with one of the early Soyuz flights was Andrea Nikolaev, a much decorated cosmonaut, and they were literally forced to get married later that year in November. Okay, Adrian Nikolaev and Tereshkova were wed at a private ceremony in, I think it was a Moscow apartment even. They wanted to do a big public ceremony, and that kind of got squashed by the Politburo. Nonetheless, they were asked to have a baby as fast as they could, which she did. In fact, Tereshkova was pregnant when she visited Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom in February '64, and Queen Elizabeth II was also pregnant at the time. All right, and I guess that would have been with now King Charles. All right. Except for a few months break that year, she went out, did a world tour. She toured the world more extensively than any cosmonaut ever to date. All right, 42 trips abroad in 7 years. From Havana, Cuba, where she met Fidel Castro. She toured the country there, never came to the U.S., of course, but then all over the world, and that set her up to be a political figure for Russia. She became a well-known Soviet Union representative with the World Peace Council in '66. In other years, she was the highlight of International Women's Year in Mexico City in 1975, because she was still the only woman to orbit the Earth, not only a couple times, but like 48 times. And then in the late 60s through the 90s, she was part of the Communist Party Politburo on there. So Uh, and we have, of course, I mentioned we have our women's space gallery. I should have took a picture of that to put in here, but we honor how many women of the 617 humans gone to space. How many are women? 77 today, and she was the first one. Uh, and Mark Thiel said she had no control when the seat ejected, and that's absolutely right. She just was flung out. None of them had any control. They had to use uh, their jumping skills, and there was a backup to her that was like the second best female jumper in this club that they were involved in there. So thanks for Nick Sedler joining us today. He says it's an interesting story, and that's why we love you staying curious out there, Nick, is we pride ourselves on trying to find some little idiosyncrasies of space to talk about, as well as the mainstream things that we always want to talk about. And we always highlight the Apollo lunar landings. So get ready for Apollo 11 coming up around the corner here next month. So I don't know what kind of person she is personally. She's, of course, when you're involved in the political arena there, you are the a world celebrity that is going to go down in space history, with Neil Armstrong as the first man on the moon, the first woman in space, Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. So I thought I saw a note here that she had voted against Putin during the she proposed to lift the term limits. Yeah, they have. So anyway, I'm not gonna get into politics of it. It doesn't mean much. But when she married Valentina Nikolaev in November after her flight, they were trying to send a fairy tale message to the world. And 1 year later, her daughter was born, Elena, and Elena's in her. Well, that would be she'd be 60 some years old now. She turned into a surgeon. And then when Nikolaev and her got divorced in 1982, Tereshkova married a surgeon that she'd met during medical examinations to requalify her as a cosmonaut. So that's interesting. Of course, took a lot of flack being a woman in a man's world, particularly the machoism of the Soviet Union. So that's a little bit about Valentina Tereshkova, or a lot about it, however you want to look at it. There she is today, 87 years old. Kind of got that Morticia white streak in her hair there is her style. Or I guess that would remind you of Bride of Frankenstein, maybe. Yes, to some of us there. But I'm sure on any Space Geek's bucket list to meet and be in the presence of this human being. I never have talked to Buzz Aldrin, but twice I've been within a few feet of him, and it wasn't appropriate to say anything. But interesting to bathe in the aura of these exceptional, famous human beings that did one of a kind things. So I salute her for living a strong life. They never want her to fly again, okay? Though the other women of the superpowers first did fly again. And that, of course, be Sally Ride and Louis Yang. And let's look at Sally Ride here a minute. We love talking about her anytime, and her birthday is May 25th, 1951. All right, so God bless her. She'd have been 73 years old this year. Born in Los Angeles, California. This is the stamp that the U.S. Postal Service issued as a forever stamp honoring her in 2018. Again, she died of pancreatic cancer in 2012 at age 61. Her ashes were interred in Woodlawn Memorial Cemetery in Santa Monica, California. There's a famous picture of her. You don't see a whole lot of pictures of the early shuttle guys and women because they were on film. But this is the first woman to go up in space on STS-7. Let me consult my scroll here because I do want to mention her. Her mates were Bob Crippen, of course, her commander, Rick Houck, the pilot, John Fabian, and Norm Thagard flew with her. And Marty, we have certainly heard John Fabian and Norm Thagard tell their stories several times at the astronaut encounter. They're usually here 2, maybe 3 times a year. Both of them comment about their experience with Sally Ride and the type of woman she was. And what kind of woman was that? Well, here is the most famous American woman for a long time, maybe since Amelia Earhart did her famous flights. And she was so humble, wanted to deflect the attention that both John Fabian and Norm Thagard say that they loved this flight with her because they got to tour the world with her. And when she was invited to the White House says, "We just want you to come." And she says, "Oh, no, I do not come without my team, without my crewmates." Everywhere they went, she never would appear. Even on Johnny Carson's show, I believe she appeared, and she brought her crew members with her. And I think maybe 1 or 2 of them couldn't come, but maybe to an event because of another obligation. But boy, that tells you a whole lot of character about this fabulous woman that was so petite. All right, we're going to show you her hands here in a minute. She said, "Young girls need to see role models in whatever careers they may choose. You can't be what you can't see." Let that sink in a minute. You can't be what you can't see. And that applies to a lot of things out there in life, I think. That is one of my favorite statements I've heard from an astronaut. And so there she was for the whole world to see, including girls growing up. And Marty, we've heard from some of those astronaut women who were inspired by Sally Ride that become astronauts. I think I'm trying to think of ones off the top, but I think Julie Payette said that the other day in there. Marty, if you think of one, chime in there. But I get a little bit emotional sometimes doing my job here, sharing space history, and I just had goosebumps on my arms just thinking about you can't be what you can't see. And she's the first woman in America to go to space, and just what that meant to not just young ladies, but older women, middle-aged women, to see this, because you had to grow up in the 60s to see some of the crap that women had to put up with to reach to where they are today, and they still are putting up with a lot, many of us would say. So that's off my soapbox, but I'm thrilled to be talking about Sally Ride anytime because of her inspiration for everybody out there. And there she is, just a few years before she died. And her the center, Sally Ride Science Center in San Diego, is an amazing facility that's on my bucket list. She co-wrote 6 books that were award-winning children's books with her lifelong partner, and there is a beautiful statue that was done to her outside, that is outside the Sally Ride Science Center in San Diego. I'm not sure where that's at. I think that's outside the, someone will correct me. I see the New York CB on the bank,
The cradle?
Is that
It has CRA, so it might be the Cradle of Aviation.
Yeah, I think that's the Cradle of Aviation up there, Marty. We'll have Nick Sedler or somebody correct me up there on that, but it doesn't matter. Look at how gorgeous that is. What an idea. She's holding the shuttle there. That is such a beautiful sculpture there. So, and here are the famous handprints we have. The only place in the world you can put your handprints on Sally's. Very petite hands, goes to about my palm, her handprints there. And there, Nick Sedler says, "You can't be what you can't see" is inspiring to all people of all ages and backgrounds. America is the ultimate melting pot, and giving opportunities to all is the American way. We salute you, Sally. Thank you, Nick, for backing that up. Thank you, Marty. That is the Cradle of Aviation. He fact-checked me there. I had Chuck Jeffrey, our collection manager, gave me a Sally Ride's space flown polo shirt, like I'm wearing here, to hold up at the talks and brag about it and try and get money from people and associations of that. And it said size 1, and I think that was a children's size 1. now, okay, because no size one woman could fit in this as a small, because I know the sizes have changed for men and women, but very petite. Her handprints are just as well worn as Neil Armstrong's in our Apollo gallery there. And I forgot to, I'll mention this. I need to mention this and put it up next week on Stay Curious, Marty. The actress Christian, oh my God, I forgot her name, Kristen Stewart, who was in among her great, she's a good actress, Kristen Stewart. Her acting career included the Twilight series, the vampire things. Unbeknownst to me, she and three other Hollywood people were in here touring our museum. I was one of the tour guides, and Nick Thomas and Karan and I did this together. But I thought another woman was the Hollywood actress. We were told not to ask questions, not to take pictures. And this cute little brunette handed me her phone to take a picture. I said, she had her handprints in Sally's, and I said, I can take a picture of you with that in there if you like. And she handed me her phone, and I took the picture. Found out later that was Kristen Stewart. Kristen Stewart. She's going to play Sally Ride in a documentary that that they're going to do. So I'll put that up next week. So that made me think about that. So a couple personal stories there about Sally Ride and Kristen Stewart, and the fact that I had her Space Flown shirt in my hand and car, showing it off there for a while there. So, well, finally, let's get to Louis Yang. Okay, June 16th, the same date as Tereshkova, but how many years later? Not 40. Not 50, yeah, 50, oh, like 48 years later, okay? Because her flight was 2012. So 49 years later. And she was 33 years old. Sally Ride was 26, the youngest American to go to space. We've had some younger suborbital flights on that. And how old was Tereshkova? She was 27, I think, when she flew. All right. She was, this lady was 34. Okay. And she was the first Chinese woman in space as a crew member of Shenzhou 9, which went up to the space station called Tiangong 1. They've called their three space stations Tiangong Heavenly Palace. But her mission was aboard it, the first Chinese woman in space. Spent about a month up there, I believe. She was an Air Force qualified pilot, so she went through the astronaut ranks, and it went to Tiangong 1 along with another. She flew with another a threesome went up there, and Chinese first space traveler Liu Wang, first repeat Louis Wang. He was the second guy to go to space. The first one, they retired him like they did John Glenn as a national hero. So she was the first female space traveler for them, and performed experiments in space medicine up there. And then she waited 10 years later to fly again aboard Shenzhou 14 to Tiangong Space Station for 6 months. She became the second Chinese woman to do a spacewalk. So that's pretty cool. There she is again. So that was September 22. So that was a little less than 2 years from now. So she's still an active cosmonaut. They call them takyonauts. Yes, takyonauts in China. And so 2 space flights, 195 days in space, and a spacewalk to her credit. And you could be looking at the first woman on the moon, because China's going probably around 2031, 2032. There she is in the typical garb and position for launch there into space. So let's see. She's described as an eloquent speaker, an avid reader, and also loves cooking. And she gave birth to her first child in February 2015 after her first flight. So she had a baby in between both flights. That child is 8 or 9 years old now. And we look forward to seeing her go to space again. By the way, Sally Ride, as we look at our one final look at our women in space there, she flew in space again on STS. Get your notes here real quick, Mark. Someone may have that quicker than me. Sally, where's your... Oh, there's it's right in front of me, of course. 41G, with Bob Crippen again as her commander and Kathy Sullivan doing the first female spacewalk. And she was in training for her third mission when the Challenger tragedy happened. So she become part of... She's one of the unique people to be on both of the presidential commissions involving the fatal shuttle missions of Challenger and then Columbia. So, and there's a Barbie doll of Wright's likeness as part of the Inspiring Women series that Barbie did in 2019. That's the one we need to get, Marty, to get the lady astronauts to sign up there. So there we go. Valentina, age 26 in 1963. Also, Sally Ride was age 32. All right, that was the youngest for a long time. Louis Yang was 33 years old when she went to space. So, hope that you've enjoyed this. We'll have all of them said that they were inspiring to women, more so the Chinese. She also said a lot of things like Sally Ride that, and to quote a famous Chinese proverb, she would say, "Women hold up half the sky. Human space missions without women are incomplete." And I think I saw that on a fortune cookie, Marty. So, but hope that you've enjoyed our look at these three women who will forever be in the annals of history as the first for their nation to go to space. And I always enjoy researching things like that. Thank you all for watching today. Thank you all for enjoying a great week. We had some good guests. Monday, we're going to have 90-year-old Keith Taylor on. He worked on the instrument unit of the Saturn V rocket. You will stay curious about that. That's Werner von Braun called it the smallest and most important segment of the Saturn V rocket. So stay tuned for that on Monday. We got other guests lined up, and I look forward to seeing you again. So until next week, keep Karan Conklin in your prayers, our museum in your prayers, and remember that I'm Mark Marquette, and I can't wait to meet you to bridge the space between us.